If you've been a fan of my channel, then you should know it's no secret that I love the Crash Bandicoot franchise, but I don't tend to focus on it too much. Every time I talk about the franchise in here, I tend to say nothing but positive things about it. Today, however, will unfortunately not be the case. Well, kinda. Truth be told, I've had this video idea in the back of my mind for about a month since the game's initial launch, but never made it because I was very conflicted about my feelings towards this game. But after sitting down and really thinking stuff through, I think it's about time I give my 2 cents on Crash Team Rumble. So just to get my general consensus out, while it's a very fun game, it's also an amalgamation of a lot of the issues playing live service games, as well as an incomplete mess that's most likely gonna last a year before they stop updating the game altogether. I know that's probably a lot to take in, and I know a lot of you are already typing away in the comments about how wrong I am, but let's take things one step at a time. For those who don't know, Crash Team Rumble is the newest installment of the Crash Bandicoot franchise. The history behind this game has to be the weirdest one I've seen in a while, first being rumored in the release of Crash 4 in 2020, when getting 106% completion and returning to the first level of the game and hitting the TV 4 times, a mysterious logo appears. A logo that has never appeared in the franchise before, and many people believe this to be a teaser for their next game. Then a month later, we get a commercial for Crash 4 of Crash and Coco playing Uncharted 4. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part comes in the end of the commercial in the background, where we see a banner that seemed to say Wumpa League. Obviously, this got many people in the community talking and speculating. Months ago, a leaker, the same one that leaked Crash 4 months ago, was also seen talking about a new PvP Crash game on Twitter. Then Crash 4 had the logo I just mentioned, plus a mysterious bad character next to our main cast in the 100% ending cutscene. Afterwards, many Crash Bandicoot content creators received gifts related to Crash Bandicoot, more specifically a Wumpa Pinata. And the last time they did this was to promote the announcement of Crash 4, so it seemed like some kind of announcement was around the corner, right? Well, no. In fact, after this, a lot of the teases for Wumpa League stopped completely, with a few small teases here and there. That is until late 2022, when the Crash Bandicoot Twitter account posted this image which teased an announcement in the Game Awards. And during the Game Awards, we finally got our first look at Wumpa League, now officially named Crash Team Rumble. Then around early 2023, we started receiving pieces of information about the game. Sometimes it was from the Crash Bandicoot social media sites promoting the game, and other news were by fans finding information about the game that wasn't promoted yet, like having no single player content, and of course, having a fucking battle pass! Then a month before launch, they announced that they would be having a closed beta. I got the chance to actually play this closed beta before the game's initial release, and in all fairness, I had a ton of fun playing it. It was clearly unfinished in some areas, like the balancing being a mess and a lot of stuttering with the connection, but overall, the game and visuals were top notch. I was pleasantly surprised with this beta, and it changed my mind from being skeptical to becoming cautiously optimistic about this game. And then the game finally dropped on June 20th, 2023. I booted up the game, and I was met with the PlayStation Store telling me I needed PS Plus in order to play the game. Okay, not necessarily the thing I wanted to see when booting up the game, especially considering the beta didn't even require you to have PS Plus, but you know, it did appear in the game's PlayStation Store description, and people were talking about it a couple months ago, but even then people weren't happy about it. Plus, like, it's just an additional $10 per month if you want to play this game that you already paid $30 or $40 for, but like, it's whatever. It's not like you have kids to feed at home or something. The Bandicoot's obviously the high priority here.
Ooh, my wallet's empty!
So after getting back into the groove of things, yeah, this is basically a more refined version of the closed beta, but damn it, this game has a lot of issues. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about my overall opinions on this game and why, as of now, I'm pretty disappointed with how the game turned out. But before we talk about that, we gotta talk about today's sponsor, me. I'm my own sponsor. I decided to open up a Kofi, baby. It's kind of like Patreon, but not really. If you donate to the Kofi, you'll have your name or even your own very drawn icon at the end of every video, as well as having early viewing to my videos with an additional behind the scenes goodies here and there. So if you want to support me and the content I make, consider donating to my Kofi. The link to the page will be in the description down below. First and foremost, I want to point out some of the positives I've had with this game because, in full honesty, this game is really fun. This is probably one of the most unique multiplayer games I've ever played. The best way I could describe it is a 4v4 team collectathon, with your main objective being collecting enough Wumpa fruit before the opposing team. There's also more collectibles like gem pads, which boost the increase of Wumpa output you get, and there's also relics which you can collect to get level-specific items or stage hazards. If you played Crash 4, then you'll be familiar with the controls of this game, but they feel a lot more refined to fit the game's playstyle, or should I say, playstyles. Each character in this game falls under 3 categories. The scorer, the middle-of-the-road characters, whose job is pretty self-explanatory. They're responsible for getting Wumpa fruit and putting it back in their stations. Then there's the blocker, who are the more heavyweight characters that don't have much mobility, whose job is to protect their team's station. And finally, we have the booster, who are the weaker characters that have an advantage in their mobility, whose job is to collect relics and obtain gem pads. That said, this game is pure chaos, and I fucking love it. Just moving around, attacking enemies, and winning matches is really fun. That's good for casual players to enjoy, but also good for people that want to learn the ins and outs of this game. There's a learning curve to it where it can be easy to play, but pretty difficult to learn depending on which character you play. Speaking of which, while the roster of this game is relatively small, I had to admit that I really like how each character plays. Obviously, we have the returning cast of playable characters from Crash 4 like Dingo Dow, Tawna, Coco, and Cortex, but we also get to play some of the other villains like Embryo and Female Entropy. Getting to play as them with their movesets from their boss fight is just really cool. We also have a new character introduced in this franchise with Batcat, who's just kind of there. Their design is fine, their gameplay is fine, they're an okay character that I will probably forget about until I play this game again. Oh yeah, and by the time I'm writing and recording this, Ripperoo officially came out as a playable character, but unfortunately I couldn't play as him since my PS Plus ran out, and I really don't feel like paying for it again, only for me to touch the game for a few hours. But from the gameplay I've seen of him, he looks relatively fun. And of course, this goes without saying, but this game is visually stunning. Granted, a lot of the assets from this game are reused from Crash 4 with some additional cosmetics that don't look that great, but again, credit where credit's due. So yeah, those are all the positives I have to say about this game, because while the visuals and gameplay are really great, everything else just leaves a lot to be desired, so let's talk about them. Let's first talk about the game modes. Well, more like the lack of game modes. As of right now, we have competitive mode, and private matches, and the tutorial. Cool, really diverse game modes here, guys. The gameplay I just sung my praises about is literally the only game mode available as of now. And listen, I know that they're gonna add more stuff in the future, but having this little game modes at the launch of your game isn't necessarily going to be the best first impression you can give both your audience and the general public. And with that said, even though it may be chaotic, playing the same game mode over and over again for hours is just gonna get pretty boring and stale. Even if it's something as simple as a King of the Hill mode or a Capture the Flag mode could have made a change. As simple as they are, it's at least something more than nothing. I also think that adding some sort of single player offline mode, like for example a single player arena mode, or even having the same game mode that is in the game right now but with only computer players, would have benefited the player base, because just restricting a mainly single player game franchise to an online multiplayer only game is a recipe for disaster. Actually, on the topic of gameplay, let's talk computer players. They get added to your team when you don't have enough players in time, which is happening a lot more often, and for an online multiplayer only game, that's not really the best look. And the AI in this game shouldn't even be considered AI because they aren't particularly intelligent. In fact, they're pretty useless all around. They generally just move around the map and don't gain much points for your team. Just to keep it simple, if you see a bot in your team, then at that point just leave the lobby because you're most likely gonna lose. In terms of other gameplay related issues, well, the stages are alright on their own. They're diverse enough for their theming and stage hazards to make them stand out. I can't really say the same about the original soundtrack for this game. Coming from Crash 4 and the Reignited trilogy, I am shocked with how dull the music in this game ended up being. The music in the Crash franchise just adds to what makes the series so iconic, and 80% of the time when I'm playing this game, I just forget that the music is there, and when I listen to it, it's just really boring. And then there's the live service modules this game does. I already talked about my issues regarding battle passes and live service games as a whole in its own separate video, so if you want to hear me talk about them, then there will be a link to the video in the description down below, as well as appearing in the eye in the corner of the video. So I'll keep this short. The way they implemented battle passes in this game, as well as the other live service bullshit other games do, surprisingly enough, isn't bad as I was expecting. Still pretty bad, mind you. It still contains a lot of the grinding required you to level up, and a lot of rewards in the battle pass are either costumes from Crash 4, music from other Crash games, or custom cosmetics that aren't worth it, but nothing that's outright terrible. Something that I've seen brought up when people talk about this game is that it should have been free to play, and on one hand, I could definitely see where they're coming from. It's a relatively new archetype for online multiplayer games, and it would have been more open to a general audiences to try it out themselves. But on the other hand, a lot of people tend to forget who the publisher of this game is. Activision, without a doubt, has the worst implementation of live service bullshit I've seen in gaming, whether the game is free or not. And even if they make it free to play, then it's just gonna gain a bunch of other new problems. Let's just be grateful that Activision doesn't monetize the fuck out of this game. But even then, I don't think it'll even go through that fate. And that's because I don't see this game lasting very long. Which is a shame to say, because this game has tons of potential and the team behind Toys for Bob clearly care about this game. But there's a lot of things that are holding this game back, and it's really starting to show. The reality of the situation is that already the majority of people consider this game a failure. It could get better in the future, but I've seen this song and dance happen multiple times before to other games, and it's only a matter of time until Crash Team Rumble meets the same fate as them. At the end of the day, this video isn't meant to be seen in face value. If you like this game and consider it to be the peak of the Bandicoot's career, more power to you. But this is how I feel about the game. It's fun, but really lackluster. That's not even worth the $30 or $40 price tag. So if you want to give this game a try, I just say save your breath for now. Anyway, this has been Manuel D, and why the fuck is there a don't sell my personal information button in the settings without it being unchecked by default? Like, low-key, I found this out during scripting, and that is so fucking stupid. Well, then again, this is Activision we're talking about, so I shouldn't be too surprised.